So in my brain, I had the rational thought at the time, just got to break this guy's arm. Like, it wasn't even a question. Like, in my brain, I'm thinking, how best do I literally break this guy's arm? I'm Justin Lesko, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu brown belt and former pro MMA fighter.
And I'm Mike Callahan, a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu brown belt and a law enforcement officer. Coming up on the show, we're looking at bad habits in Jiu Jitsu and ways to fix them.
Also, are Brian Ortega and Jessica Andrade back to championship form?
Maybe. Yes. For one, maybe no. Probably no for the other.
This weekend coming up is also one of the most anticipated fights of the year between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Justin Gaethje, and we'll preview that as well. But before we get into all that, this episode of the show is brought to you by Crown Rash Guards.
Yeah, so they actually have a new version of their original rash guard. It's called the V 2.0, and it's actually the one that you've seen us wearing if you've been checking our Instagram page.
Yeah, I've been looking handsome in the black one, and you've been looking slightly less handsome in the brown.
So we'll agree to disagree on that part, but the rash guards are equally as good looking. We'll just say that.
They're minimalist rash guards, so they're not over the top or garish.
Garish?
Garish. It's a word.
Anyway, you guys can head over to crownrashguards.com and check out their affordable and minimalist rash guards.
And this is where I say, welcome to That Jiu Jitsu podcast. Like, when we were rolling the other day, I was trying to do a lot of the stuff that I was watching the guard retention anthology.
Yeah.
And there's so much good stuff in there. So much good stuff in there that it's hard to, like, as you're actively training.
Yeah, you can't. It's
all.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
But it's so crazy. Like, we've talked about this in the past, like, just the availability of, like, YouTube and BJJ Fanatics and, like, instructionals and stuff. It's crazy compared to when we were white belts and YouTube. But it was almost like a taboo thing for, like, instructors would tell you, like, don't go on YouTube,
right.
don't work things that I'm not teaching you. But I think that mentality is shifting a little bit.
It absolutely has, but, like, so that was definitely viewed as, like, a bad habit, I think. Like, when we were getting into the game, but the quality of the instructionals
I would say that
drastically changed.
It's evolved so much that I don't think we consider that a bad habit anymore. But I think there are also things that will, no matter how much jiu-jitsu changes, will always be a bad habit. Like, there's stuff that will always be, please don't do that. For your sake and mine, please don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain shitty things to do in this sport that will remain timeless.
I think number one on the list is, for your sake and my sake, wash your gi. Wash your gi. Yeah. Wash your gi.
I mean, that's just, it's just be a fucking clean person. Yeah.
It seems like a weird thing to have to tell somebody, like, hey, clean your clothes. Like, what other sport do you go to the gym and just throw your gym clothes in the trunk of your car and drive home?
Dude.
And then the next time you show up to class, you take it out of your trunk.
So the other day I went to train, and before I trained, I grabbed my gis, and, like, I just hang shit up all over my garage after I wash them to dry, right? So I grabbed my gi and I grabbed my rash guard, and it was the fucking wrong rash guard, and it was that long sleeve, like, head whatever rash guard that I have that I must have rolled in 2 weeks ago, and it was just, like, hanging on. And I didn't realize it until I put it on at the gym, and I'm like, motherfucker, but I had that shit that you gave me.
Oh, the spray?
Yeah, and so I just, like, bathing in it in the locker room, and it still fucking stunk. I felt bad. But so, like, if you want to have shitty hygiene, like, that's a personal decision. But when you're doing a sport,
you're engaging so closely with other
have
people,
some fucking
you don't get to make
have
that
some
decision.
common decency. Take a shower, wash your clothes, like, trim your fucking fingernails, just practice good hygiene. Trim your fucking toenails too, so you're not slicing my fucking femoral artery through my gi pants with them. Luckily, I know how to apply a tourniquet. Fuck.
Luckily. All that training's paying off. First responder training. I already can tell there's going to be comments below this YouTube video of people saying, wash your gi, but don't wash your belt. Don't wash your belt because that's where all your magic is stored. I wash my belt.
I do.
I don't know. It's something I would say for a long time I didn't wash my belt, but now I would just hang it up on the hook when I left the academy. But now it skeeves me out a little bit because I see the other people who are more sweaty than I am just hanging their belts up too. And if it's gross for me to think about them doing it, then I should probably wash my belt. But the debate rages on, I guess.
Here's the other thing. You know the worst, and this has happened a few times. Like if you have some type of fucking rash or or fungus, or you have fucking ringworm or MRSA, like stay home.
Or COVID. Like right now,
No,
if you're
yeah, I
listening to
mean,
this
but
in
like, yeah, I
2020,
mean,
like if
like
you have
if we're
COVID,
talking,
stay
yeah,
home.
but that COVID has nothing to do with like hygiene. You know what I mean?
No.
Like
But
if
just
it
the
like
stay home
generally
bit.
speaking about personal hygiene, like if you have ringworm or you have fucking MRSA, stay home. That shit spreads like wildfire in a gym. You know, just stay the fuck home. Here's another thing. If you're a gym owner and you find out that somebody's coming into your place and knowingly has something, like obviously COVID now, because COVID's life threatening, and to a smaller extent, so MRSA is too, right? Because people can die from MRSA, but I mean, like even like ringworm or any type of skin rashes or something. Like if you know that somebody's coming into your place with that knowingly and they're training with people, like kick them the fuck out of your
Yeah.
gym. Like,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
let him fucking train there, like, ever again. Like, you don't want that shit. So, just my 2 cents.
I agree. I also think for your own benefit, not a hygiene issue, but if you're not stretching at least a couple times a week, not when you're at the academy, not when you're
So
rolling, you're
we
just
go
setting
from
yourself
don't
up
bring
for
in
more.
potentially life-threatening things to make sure your muscles are warm and stretched.
Well, maybe we should have started so high with like the life-threatening stuff because I think everything else that's a bad habit is probably not going to kill you. You have to ease it back down to like everyone's already assumed to stay alive level of,
Yeah.
yeah, you should stretch and avoid injury. I stretch every night watching the television for like 35
Holy
minutes.
shit, do you really?
Yeah.
See, I
Yeah.
lift weights. You know what I mean? Like there's only so much time. Like I've
Bro,
started.
there is only so much time in the fucking day. It's such a cliche thing to hear people say, but there literally is only so much time in the day. And it's the only time that I can stretch is while we're watching Big Brother and The Bachelor. If I'm watching TV, if I have the time to sit down and just watch TV, I might as well do something
Yeah.
productive and try and stretch.
So I've always lifted weights, and like I would do like sporadic cardio, but I've over the past month I've I've picked up the cardio. So like maybe not just stretching, but like supplement your training. You
Yeah,
know,
you got to perform some form of supplemental self-care that's going to enable you to keep training jiu-jitsu. Because if you don't, you're just going to get hurt or you're not going to get the most out of your training. And that's sort of the whole point is to get the most out of
supplement
your
your
training.
training.
I think one of the biggest bad habits that white belts have is not tapping to a submission does not mean you're defending that submission. So like you might be rolling with a higher belt, your arm might be straight in an arm bar, and just because the guy was nice and didn't break your arm in the training room and let it go, it doesn't mean you escaped that position. So not tapping, you're just putting your training partner in a spot where he's got to decide to let go to not be a dick and break your arm. So just tap. Just like get over the mentality of you're losing.
I agree. And like it puts like the higher belts in an awkward position too, because then it undoubtedly pisses them off, right? Like you're like, what the fuck, dude? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's it's an ego thing on a couple different levels. Like it's obviously an ego thing for the white belt who doesn't want to tap, but at the same time, it's like to the higher belt, it's like dude, I could break your fucking arm, or you know. That's why Danaher always says he's like, there's no questions with strangles.
Yeah.
You
You just
know,
go to
you
sleep.
go to sleep, and
But again, I don't want to have to be putting white belts to
feel
sleep
much
because I
better
don't
about
want
putting
to
somebody to
tap.
sleep than I do about breaking a fucking limb. I feel
I do, but I don't want to do either if I can avoid it. Do you want to know one of the weirdest things about MMA? It's crazy how when the fight starts, like your brain sort of switches and you're not really the same person. This is my own personal experience. So I had a fight where it was a championship fight and there was like 10 seconds left. I spun off for an armbar and it was straight. I had it. The dude wasn't tapping. So in my brain, I had the rational thought at the time, just got to break this guy's arm. Like, it wasn't even a question. Like, in my brain, I'm thinking, how best do I literally break this guy's arm? And the fight's over, and like, I won because, I won. And then you come back to like your normal life brain, and you're like, man, that was a weird thing to think totally straight of just, I guess I'll just break this guy's arm. Like, it's a totally normal thing to do.
That's an assassin's mentality. You got to have it.
It was weird. It was,
well, you got to have
weird,
it.
Though,
if you don't have,
you have to have
if
it.
you don't have that mentality, you shouldn't be in the sport.
Right, but it's just weird that like that's not a normal thing to think in any other part of your life except that one very specific situation where you're like, okay, I'm going to do my best to break this guy's arm. And fortunately, his arm didn't break, I guess, and I won, so win-win all around. But not tapping isn't a defense. Don't you hate when you're rolling with a white belt? And you might want to work on like side control escapes or something. So you kind of let them pass your guard to get to like a dominant position. And then you overhear them telling the other white belts how they passed your guard. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, just one name comes to mind who like was always keeping score in a training room, but yeah. So it's difficult now. Like the place I'm at now, it's difficult to. Like I realized the other day, it's going to be extremely difficult to fully implement things into my game because there's not like the classes that I go to. It's just all high level guys. Like we drill and everything, but like if you're drilling something and you're like, holy fuck, like I want to implement this into my game. Like you're not going to do it with a 3-stripe fucking or 3rd degree black belt. You're not going to do it with a 3rd degree fucking brown belt. Like you have to drill something. Like you understand it in theory, right? And then you have to start putting it in, you have to drill it, and then you have to drill it like situationally, and you can do that with high level guys. But in terms of drilling it live or pulling something off live, like it's nearly impossible to do unless you're going against white belts and blue belts.
Yeah.
So, I mean
there's a symbiotic relationship between higher belts and lower belts where both parties can get something out of
training. You need my knowledge and I need your lack of knowledge, so I don't know. I think that like again that comes down to egos, and I think like the last two things we talked about can kind of just be covered by don't have an ego, like come to the realization that as a white belt or a blue belt, like if you're getting put in positions that you feel like that are advantageous to you, like you're most likely put there for a reason,
Yeah, you probably got put there. You didn't get yourself there, and there's a difference between those two.
We were just talking about this, so like another thing came to mind where it's like, and I've seen this happen before. I've actually had this happen to me before. So at this new place that I'm at United, like I got caught by one of their blue belts. This dude was a monster, right? I got caught in an X choke by one of the blue belts, and it was just something that like snuck up on me and I didn't even realize it was coming. But like that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu, man. Like you're in the sport, like you have to, shit happens, you know what I mean? Like, so getting back to what I was originally saying, something that drives me crazy is when you'll be rolling with somebody or you'll see two guys rolling and it's a lower belt and a higher belt, and somebody locks in a submission or does something and the higher belt knows that he's beat, and all of a sudden it'll go from competitively trying to get out of it to like in a split second, like he'll start coaching them through the submission. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So it'd be like, that's tight, but if you do this, and it's like, bro, shut the fuck up. I have your back. I'm choking you right now. Like it's gonna finish just fine. Like afterwards, you can talk to me about it, and if you think that there's a different way that you can, you know what I mean? Like if you think that there's anything that I can add, but like don't. I think that's just like a...
Yeah, I had you, man. Yeah, but it's like you said before, it's an ego thing. You don't want to admit that you were getting tapped by a lower belt, so you start to coach them through it, or somehow you're injured all of a sudden in a different part of your body that they're not working. Yeah.
Yeah, like
It happens. Like,
I don't care if like my leg's about to fall off. If I'm caught in a submission, like if you're catching me in a choke or you're catching me in an armbar, like I'm not gonna like I'll deal with the injury afterwards, or I'll just tap and then I'll deal with the injury if I'm
yeah,
legitimately injured. But I'm not gonna tap and then like say like it was unrelated to the you know what I mean? Like
I think a mistake that I made when I was first training, when I was a white belt, and I guess you could call it a bad habit. I just had this mentality of there. I didn't have the difference between a guard that was hard to pass. I had a guard that was hard to break. So I would pull close guard and just hang on for dear life. And it's sort of a bad habit in that I wasn't thinking of like, how can I do anything? I was only thinking, how can I survive? How can I
yeah.
not have anything done to me? And I would look at it as a win if for 3 minutes someone was in my close guard with their posture broken. I wasn't sweeping or attacking her at all, but I walked away thinking like, oh, that blue belt, he couldn't pass my guard. And it's like, while technically true, it's not really like doing anything for anybody. So I think you should have the mentality of, don't have the habit of like, I just want to survive. Like you have to try to engage in the rounds to get something from it.
Yeah, it goes back to like you need to evolve. You know what I mean? Like if you're just trying to survive, and surviving's one thing, like there's something to be said about, doing that, but at the same time, like you need to evolve. Like whether it's like if you are like we're guard players, like I'm a half guard guy. But like I'm always trying to evolve my half guard.
Yeah.
I'll start off in similar positions, but I'm always trying to think like how can I work from here? And I
Yeah, it's
thought
like you can't do the same thing over and over.
right. You got to figure it out. And if you don't, you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
I think a lot of these come back to, like we said earlier, like an ego thing.
It is.
And thinking about not wanting to lose in the training room. And if you try something new, if you try to play a new guard and it gets passed and you're a good guard guy, you don't want to feel like you just got your guard passed. Like that's a bad feeling. So
it's egotistical. It's competitive. Like you're in a competitive sport. So I get it to a certain extent, but like it's not going to benefit you to be competitive. Like if you want to be competitive,
right.
you have to take it. You have to pick and choose your spots when you're competitive. And in the training room, the competitive nature should be dialed back a little bit because that's how you evolve.
All right. So I think to sum up, if you're a white belt listening and you want a nice condensed list of habits to avoid and what to do differently, make sure you show up. Don't skip classes. Do some sort of lifting or stretching or preferably both to take care of your body. Don't have an ego as best you can. Try new things. Wash your gi. Wash your belt. Trim your nails.
Wash yourself. Like, take a fucking shower.
Wash yourself should go without saying, but wash yourself. Anything else I missed?
No, just be humble. Be clean. Be humble.
Just be like us. We're the most humble guys you'll ever find.
I'm not. No, I'm not.
Humble AF.
I'm an egomaniac, but at least I'm aware of it. Like there's a certain level of self-awareness.
Like, we talk about like check the ego and like that's a bad habit, and then we talked about in the last episode about how one of us is gonna kill the other if they hit a tap rolling. So it's like,
but I mean that's different. It's this is the nature of our relationship and how it's come to be over the years. But I don't really think I'm an egomaniac in jiu-jitsu. Like I think I've really calmed down. Like I used to be like when I was younger, I used to be the guy like slamming the mat if I would lose. And Reef Snyder's probably listened to this podcast because he listened to all of it. Like Reef Snyder always used to call me out on slamming the mat and everything, and he would act like he was fucking, like he what was it, the Dalai Lama on the mats. But at Reef Snyder, I've seen you slam your hand on the mat and storm off more than once or twice. So don't you go judging me for punching the mats.
Well, every time you've gotten mad at me, it's because I've tapped you with a thing that you didn't think I should tap you with, and that was just me expanding my horizons. So
I didn't. The only time I ever got really mad, and it wasn't. I don't get mad at you. I get mad at myself. It was
I know,
just,
but it's just more fun to tell the story about you being mad at me as opposed to like, oh, I hit you with the Callahan triangle and you were so
yeah.
mad
I
at me.
mean,
That's
and
just a
just
more
if
fun
we're being
story.
honest, it was like a one time. It would literally you hit me with it one time, and it was a lapel. It was a triangle that was combined
It
with
was
a
basically a Bravo triangle from like a semi-closed guard.
yeah. Um,
Maybe that would be a good instructional for us to put out later in this week when we train in a few
I'm gonna
days.
have no parts of that.
You don't want to do an
No,
instructional
because it
if we.
doesn't like it's. There's no need to do an instructional on it because it's never gonna happen again. I'm probably the only person in the history of jiu-jitsu. It was just one of those things when you're in that stage of doing stupid shit and it just happened to stick. It'll never happen again,
All
and
right.
it'll literally never happen again.
Well, if you're listening to this and you want to see a breakdown of the Callahan triangle, please send us a message on Instagram. And if we get enough of them, he'll be forced to let me do it. So.
No.
In the MMA world, we have a lot to discuss. We had a busy weekend last weekend, and then obviously we have the Khabib fight coming up. And I guess we'll go chronological. So we'll start with last weekend. I was very impressed by both Ortega and Andrade. I think Ortega, I think that's a win that does enough for him to get back at another title shot.
Yeah. And he hadn't fought in 2 years, so there was.
You don't realize that was so long ago, but.
Yeah, he's if Max was still the champion, I would say that it was less likely, but yeah, he's going to get a title shot. I think Dana White already said it. So, and he the way he fought the other night, who knows? Who knows what?
He looked very smooth in his striking. Not that he had bad striking before, like we saw he did to Frankie Edgar, but he's a jiu-jitsu guy. And on Saturday against Korean Zombie, who is a great fighter, he looked like it was two different levels.
Right.
It just was two different levels. And Ortega looked very smooth in his movement and his footwork, and it was a very impressive win.
If you're going to, and here's the other thing, if you're going to compare it to the Frankie fight, like he was getting beat on the feet. Not like he wasn't getting killed, but Frankie was definitely getting the better of that fight before he hit that elbow, So, but he outclassed the Korean Zombie like start to finish. He was on point.
You mentioned the elbow, that spinning elbow that he
Oh
hit,
my god. Yeah.
Dude, I watched the replay like 3 times just to watch the elbow over and over, man. It was clean, and
he's got some vicious elbows.
When you look at his record, he's 14-1 now. His only loss is to who some, including me, would consider the greatest of all time featherweight in Max Holloway.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have a bunch of losses to nobody. He's got one loss to the best to ever do it. So,
and it's a matter of if not him, then who? You know what I mean? If it's not going to be him, then who else? And here's the thing with, let's jump to the other one, Andrade. Like, there's literally no one at 125, so she's probably going to get a title fight because who the fuck else is there to fight?
Right.
Like that division needs to go away. Besides Shevchenko, like.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Andrade looked very good, but she's coming off of back-to-back losses before this win. So
yeah,
she lost to Rose, and then she lost to Zhang Weili, which again, 2 former champions, like 2 great fighters, but she just doesn't have the same record as Ortega. And even though she looked great in this fight, I think that second loss in a row and then rebounding this weekend, I just don't think it does enough to propel her to like.
But would you be surprised if she got it? Because there's literally
no.
else.
I wouldn't be surprised. And it's just, I think of the 2 of them, you had two people bouncing back this weekend, and I think just Ortega, he had less of a distance to bounce, and he still bounced higher. And Andrade had a bigger bounce ahead of her, and she didn't bounce quite as high.
So,
and I don't know how I feel about that analogy that I just used.
Yeah, but it's okay.
I'm going to give you a fact or fiction. You let me know fact or fiction.
Okay.
Justin Gaethje is the biggest test of Khabib's career. Fact or fiction? And I realize I could have said true or false, but fact or fiction sounds classier.
Fact, because of his wrestling. Fact, because of his wrestling. Yeah. I don't know if he's I don't know if Khabib's faced somebody with the wrestling capabilities of Gaethje. He's a better wrestler than Justin Gaethje, but I don't know if he's faced it.
You think Khabib is a better wrestler, like in a pure wrestling match? You think Khabib beats Justin Gaethje? Justin Gaethje's Division I All-American. I don't know.
All right, so that you saying this makes me realize that you've never heard this story. So Ed Ruth, who is one of the greatest NCAA wrestlers of all time, he fights in Bellator's welterweight division, and he was a three-time NCAA champion at Penn State, and he placed third his freshman year. So he had 3 career losses, and there's been multiple accounts of Khabib fucking destroying him in the training room in a wrestling match at AKA.
But by Daniel Cormier, is he the lead source on these accounts?
It was Brendan Schaub. It was Darren Wynn or somebody else. But I mean, it was.
I'll take their word for it.
Yeah.
I
mean, and that's I don't know. You'd be hard like so in college wrestling there have been 4 four-time national champions. And I think there's only 5 or 6 3-time national champions. So this guy is one of the top 10 greatest NCAA wrestlers of all time. And Khabib was, rumored to be manhandling him. Yeah, I think so, yeah. And he's okay. Much larger than Khabib, too. So, yeah, I think Khabib's a better wrestler than Gaethje. But we'll see.
Because, again, the reason so obviously we're talking about the wrestling within 1 minute of talking about this fight. The wrestling, I think, is going to determine the outcome of this fight. I think that Gaethje is his biggest test. Gaethje is a defensive wrestler. He's not a very offensive wrestler, which we'll get to in a minute what I think the ideal strategy would be to beat Khabib if you're Gaethje. But it's going to be, can Khabib land the takedown or not? Because if Khabib can't land the takedown, which I think is unlikely, I think he will take down Gaethje. Gaethje's the better striker, right? There, we're in agreement there that Gaethje's the better striker of the two. I think if you were Justin Gaethje, I think you would try to beat Khabib at his own game. I think you try to offensively wrestle with Khabib, which he already has said in the media that he's not going to do. But again, people say a lot of things in the media that they're not going to do, and they end up doing it anyway because strategy and gamesmanship. But I think if you have the wrestling credentials that Gaethje has, even though he wasn't an offensive wrestler and he was more of a defensive wrestler, you got to try to take it to Khabib. Khabib's going to come forward with pressure, and you have to do something to negate that pressure.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're saying, so there's different, if he's coming forward to, and you're saying that's still defensive wrestling. Like offensive, so offensive. So you're saying that he should be out there, not backing down from him, pinning him against the cage, going forward, actively shooting from a distance for takedowns. That's not going to work. He's not going to take.
I don't know if he should be I don't know if he should be shooting from the open, like hitting an open shot in the middle of the cage. I think he should do what Khabib wants to do. He should follow his strikes in and look to engage behind his striking to then work his own takedowns. I don't think he should be like, look what John Kavanaugh said about the Conor fight. They worried so much about Conor defending takedowns, they came away from their own offensive game plan.
Yeah,
and I think if Gaethje is preparing for this fight thinking only defense, only defense, only defense, you're taking something away from yourself. You need to you need to do something to stop the takedowns besides just sprawling on the takedown. You know what I mean? Like,
so
there needs to be an element of forward.
I think Gaethje's style can most aptly be described as like a modernized version of Chuck Liddell's style, right? Because look at these guys that he's lost to. He lost to Cerrone and he lost to Eddie Alvarez, didn't he? So, right? So those guys, like, he's just very stubborn. Like, he's a better wrestler than both of those guys. Much better wrestler.
Justin Gaethje in his entire UFC career has been on the bottom position for like 15 seconds, like
Yeah.
literally 15
Well,
seconds.
that's gonna.
And in both cases, it was Michael Johnson clipped him and knocked him down.
Yeah.
And in the Eddie fight, he was like exhausted and injured, or not injured. He was exhausted and hurt, and Eddie like tripped him down.
That
and got right back up in both cases.
that stat is going to change fucking dramatically this weekend.
I agree.
However,
but it doesn't give us a lot to go on to see
doesn't,
how
but
he's
he
gonna
doesn't take
work
people
to get
down.
himself back up.
He's a sprawl and brawl kind of guy, and he is if he can keep this fight on the feet, that's where his best chance is to win, is to keep this fight on the feet. Obviously, if he ends up on top of Khabib, I don't know if Khabib's ever been taken down. I don't think he has been. But if he ends up on top of him, it's pretty safe to say that he's going to be in a very good situation. But just keep staying off of his back, because if Khabib gets on, like, you're not getting up.
What we know what Khabib is going to do. Khabib does it in every fight. He's going to come forward, going to push to the cage, use the cage to set up his takedown, get on top, and just start grinding it out and doing his damage. And he does it every single fight, and people can't stop him. And that's very impressive, that when you know exactly what a person is going to do, you can't stop it. He's a very impressive fighter. I agree that that's what he's going to do to Gaethje. He's going to attempt to do that to Gaethje. We don't have any sample size to see how Gaethje fights off of his back. He was straight up. In both times we've seen him in the bottom position in the UFC, he was straight back up.
Yeah.
I don't know how he's going to do that against Khabib.
We'll see.
I think what's going to happen is Gaethje in the Tony fight, his most recent fight, was much more technical, and he was still throwing power shots, but he wasn't throwing wide, wild, looping shots, and he wasn't taking huge chances. But even if you watch the shots that he landed against Tony, there's still openings there for counter wrestling by Khabib. He's still going to be able to go under some of those shots and hit the takedown. So I think the takedown is inevitable. The big question mark is, can Gaethje get himself back up and have enough time on the feet to do enough damage to win the fight? I personally don't think he will.
Yeah, I don't think
he will.
Khabib
will win.
It's regardless of what we think, it's impossible to bet against Khabib.
I know. You just can't bet against Khabib. You just can't. I mean, the guy's 28-0. Like I just said, you know what he's going to do every fight, and he does it successfully every fight. I don't think it's a good bet to bet against him. Maybe if there's crazy odds, I'll throw $5 on it, but don't bet your house on Gaethje.
Khabib's going to win, probably by decision.
I agree that Khabib will win. Part of me thinks it'll be a decision, but I don't like to agree with you on both accounts. So I'll just say Khabib's going to win, and I think he'll finish him in the 4th.
Okay. So did you see that Fight to Win is back in Philly?
Yeah, they're here till like Thanksgiving or something. They're here for multiple weeks in a row.
Right. So these guys, they call themselves like Team No Sleep. That's like the production. They call each other. So I just found this out. This is the first indoor sporting event that's been able to host fans since this whole thing started.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, and it's social distance, and it's a limited amount of tickets and all that bullshit. But yeah, it was the first time, and it was a really good show. John Blank was on there. He won the no gi. I think it was the middleweight title with a pretty sick heel hook at like 7 minutes into the bout.
That dude's good, man. That dude is real good.
He was 4th place at ADCC. That he just opened up a gym. I've been up to the 10th Planet Bethlehem place once or twice. Yeah,
but that's not so far from us.
Right. He opened up one in Allentown, which I think is even further. But a lot of the local guys, it was good to see them back out there competing. They're back this weekend again, and they got a bunch of of people, local people. So
Well, that's what they always do. That Seth Daniels from Fight to Win is always good about that, where he does these cards and he pulls a bunch of talent from wherever they are. And now that they're here for like a month straight doing cards every weekend, it'll be a good opportunity for local guys, local to us, to get up there and compete on a big stage.
And they're advertising it, you know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
sending out feelers to local fighters and everything. But Grace Gundram's fighting this weekend.
Yep.
Vinicius Ferreira, he placed second at ADCC. Jared Wiener's fighting. He just got a fight.
I just saw that he announced that they were doing. At the time of this recording, it's just announced, so you might be hearing this later in the week. But
yeah, so it's Diana J said that she's going to accompany me to this event on Friday, since my other friends are fucking losers and won't
present
go.
Company included.
So, yeah, man, I am stoked. I'm stoked that it's back in Philly. I'm stoked that they're letting fans into it. And we talked about it before, but this is like, say what you want about Seth Daniels and those guys, but it is like, they're not making what they were making prior to this pandemic. And that, it's taken a lot of energy and they're jumping through a lot of hoops to get these events put on the places where they are. But, they're fucking doing it.
They're doing what they can to get grappling shows out there and getting guys exposure who right now otherwise are not, and giving local guys a shot on these cards, man. It's
awesome.
It's important for the sport. It's important for the sport to have events like this where you can have local guys. Like, we've competed for Fight to Win. I've competed on the same card as Eddie Cummings. Like, you don't really get that in MMA, where I'm not going to go fight on the same card as Connor just because I want to and because Seth offers me a match. Like, it's very cool that you get that sort of local feel where you got local guys that and can cheer for going on the same stage as the best guys in the world. It's a very cool event.
Another thing to think of is, like, if you look at like things that have like really changed the landscape of jiu-jitsu, like Fight to Win has to be up there. Like Seth Daniels and Fight to Win has to be up there. So like Fight to Win, like BJJ Fanatics with these instructionals, like flow grappling, like these things are, not necessarily people, but like when, the jiu-jitsu history books are written, like we're going to be able to look back, and those are three of these things where we're going to be able to say, you know what, that really flipped the script, that changed the game. So
you're gonna have chapter 1 will be flow grappling, and chapter 2 will be BJJ Fanatics, chapter 3 will be Fight to Win, and chapter 4
that jiu-jitsu podcast. Yep, I knew it was coming.
Well, I'll be doing the 2 screens on Saturday. I'll do UFC fights up on the TV, and then I'll have my laptop down here with flow grappling going for Fight to Win. So
yeah, I'm pumped. It's a 5-hour fucking show, dude. I didn't tell Diana that. She's sitting in the other room. It's a 5-hour show. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. If you want to follow either one of us or the show on Instagram, we're going to put the links below. Also, we have video versions of all of our episodes available on YouTube, and we're going to put the link to that below, so feel free to check that out.
I'm also going to link to our Patreon account. Patreon is where we have all of our bonus content, instructionals, technique breakdowns. We do bonus episodes, monthly Q&A, a blooper reel every month. So check that out for tiers as low as $3, and it's really a great way to help support the show. I'm also going to link to the fundraiser page for the charity match that I'm doing in 2 weeks for Tap Cancer Out. Any donation you can make is greatly appreciated, and if you're not in a position to donate, just sharing the link also helps our cause, so give it a look. Say Callahan Triangle.
Not gonna do that.
Thanks for hanging out, everybody.
Thanks,
we'll
guys.
See you next time.